Hi, my name is Rachel, and if someone had looked at my life from the outside just a couple of years ago, they would most likely have thought that I was one of those rare women who had everything worked out: a successful career, a strong family, a cozy home where children's laughter sounds. I'm 33, and I'm a writer. My first detective novel, which seemed to shoot out of nowhere, became a real sensation. I still remember shaking as I leafed through the first rave reviews and looked at the endless growth of the sales chart. This success brought with it a new lifestyle: publicity, travel, interviews, and, of course, money, more than we've ever had. I've been married to Thomas for 8 years now. We met when I was 24, and he immediately struck me as reliable, calm, and balanced, the kind of person you can lean on when you're feeling rough. We have a son, Gary. He's 7 now, and he's my whole light, my joy, my reason not to give up, even when my soul is tearing apart. At first, Thomas worked. I won't say that he earned a lot, but he behaved responsibly, kept the house afloat while I wrote my first manuscripts in the desk, not knowing if I would ever be published. And then everything changed. When the publisher made me a big offer and a new chapter of our lives began. Thomas quit his job. We decided that it would be better this way: he would spend more time with his son, and I would focus on writing. It seemed like the perfect compromise. But over time, small alarm bells began to appear in his behavior, at first infrequent, then increasingly frequent evening disappearances. He said he was just playing the slot machines, purely to relax. I didn't think much of it. Let everyone relax in their own way. But then I discovered that our shared finances were draining amounts that I hadn't spent, and these purchases had nothing to do with family. Over time, the truth came out like a dead fish to the surface. Thomas was having an affair. Moreover, he wasn't just dating someone, he was gifting his mistress with expensive jewelry, silks, and branded bags, and all this is paid for with my credit card. He didn't even bother to cover his tracks. It cut to the quick. I endured it, for Gary's sake, for the sake of the illusion of a family that I tried so desperately to preserve. But at some point, the pain turned into physical tension, squeezing my chest and turning my stomach. It was in this state that I woke up one strange morning. Thomas was standing at the dresser, fastening the cufflinks on a crisp white shirt, in an immaculate dark suit. It was immediately alarming. He hadn't worn business clothes for a long time. Of course I asked, "Where are you dressed up for?" He flinched, as if I had caught him doing something indecent, but then he straightened up, frowned, and, gathering himself, answered, "I have an interview. Maybe there will be a job, the finance department of a company." I nodded, suppressing a slight feeling of relief mixed with suspicion. "Good luck, Thomas. I hope everything will work out. We really need some changes." He left, and I stayed at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that suddenly felt cold. I tried to focus on my work. Deadlines were pressing. The editor was waiting for a new manuscript, but my thoughts kept returning to the morning, to his worried look, to the tie he didn't even wear to our last anniversary. The night passed in anticipation. Gary had fallen asleep a long time ago, and I was sitting at my laptop, but I was writing more idly. The lines didn't add up, the phrases didn't sound. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard the door slam. He's back, staggering as if he had been beaten by the wind. He entered the hallway and silently walked into the living room. His suit, the same one, was saturated with the smell of alcohol and some kind of cloying feminine perfume. He collapsed onto the sofa, and a smartphone slowly slipped out of his hand, the screen of which was already unlocked. Something inside me flinched. It wasn't curiosity, no, it was a necessity, painful, burning, as if my future life depended on what I saw. I picked up the phone, I scrolled through it. The messages flashed one after the other, like hammer blows to the heart. He was dating her, with Gloria, my friend, my trusted, closest woman, to whom I told things I hadn't even told Thomas. The messages were bright and unabashed. They were having dinner at a restaurant with a panoramic view of the night city, the same one where I once dreamily asked him to take me for an anniversary, but he then said it was too expensive. I put my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. Everything was blurred by tears. It felt like the air in the room had become as heavy as water, and I couldn't breathe. I quietly saved the correspondence, sending it to myself. Now was not the time to make a scene. I needed to think about it. I needed to figure out how to move on. In the morning, Thomas behaved as usual, as if everything that was happening was just another page in a novel, and not reality. I approached him, trying to speak calmly. "Thomas, you said you had an interview, but you came back quite late, what happened?" He didn't answer immediately, he turned around, avoiding my gaze. "Well, I met an old friend after the interview, we went out for a drink." I tilted my head. "A friend? Who don't I know?" He waved an exasperated hand. "I don't have to explain everything to you, do I?" I exhaled slowly. "Yes, you're right," I replied, feeling everything burn inside, not even from anger, but from clarity. I knew everything. His answer only confirmed what had become an unbearable reality. It's been a month since the night reality finally unfolded in front of me in all its ugly, merciless fullness, and no matter how hard I tried to distract myself from the pain that wouldn't let go day or night, I could no longer deny the obvious. My husband, Thomas, was still having an affair with a woman who I used to call her my friend. Even though I already knew the truth, I was still torn between despair and silent stubbornness, as if hoping that if I didn't say it out loud, it would somehow evaporate by itself. But every day it's become like playing with fire, where I'm not the player, but the firewood. The mere thought of talking to Thomas directly made me feel sick, not because I was afraid of his reaction, no, but because it would mean admitting, not only to him, but also to myself, that everything was over, that our family, for which I had sacrificed so much, was crumbling like dust through my fingers. Any other woman might have already thrown evidence on the table, thrown him out the door and called a lawyer, but I had Gary. Our son, he was only 7, and his world was too fragile, too soft to destroy completely. I couldn't be the reason that he would see his dad on weekends, if at all. Meanwhile, Thomas, as if sensing my indecision, began to disappear from the house more and more often. My busy work schedule became a cover for him, which he used with sophisticated ease. I spent long hours in my room, locked in with my laptop and cups of cold coffee, as if continuing to write a novel, although in fact my soul was occupied with something else, catching the thinnest threads of lies that were weaving around me at an increasing speed. It was unbearably painful, but it also had one strange benefit: he became careless, and I got a chance to learn more. During one of his evening disappearances, when the house was quiet and only the lamp on the bedside table cast a soft light on the old carpet, I decided to rummage through his things. I'm not proud of it, but I don't regret it either. I should have known. Among the scribbled receipts, random pieces of paper, and perfumed napkins, I found a stack of receipts. The receipts were for expensive women's items, cashmere coats, silk scarves, jewelry. None of these things had ever appeared in our house. And they certainly hadn't been handed to me, and that was the most disappointing confirmation. It was all meant for her, Gloria, but where does the money come from? Thomas did not have a stable income. He lived on my transfers, the small amounts that I left for household chores. No amount of spending could explain such a luxury. I could feel anxiety rising in my chest, and it spread through my body like cold mercury. I had to find out where he was getting the funds from, and more importantly, how deep his lies went. I made a decision to follow him, but first we had to arrange for someone to look after Gary. I dialed my brother's number. He didn't know a word about what was going on. I couldn't share this pain with him, not when I still didn't know what to do with it. When he arrived, I greeted him with a warm smile, trying to hide behind it the tension that twisted my insides. "I'm sorry I called you so suddenly," I said, feigning lightness, even though everything inside was shaking. He raised his eyebrows, looking at me curiously. "It's okay, but you suddenly asked me to keep an eye on Gary. Did something happen?" I shook my head, as if dismissing the importance of what was happening. "I just need to buy something that can't be ordered online." He narrowed his eyes as if he was reading me between the lines. "You've never been a shopaholic, you usually order everything online." I forced a smile. "Yes, I know, but today is an exception." The lie cut me from the inside, but I knew that for the sake of the truth, for the sake of my son, for the sake of myself, I had to do this. Holding back the tremor in my voice, I said, "I need to buy something at the store, and it's urgent. Please stay with Gary for a while." "Of course, just try to come back as soon as possible," he said, cautiously looking into my eyes, as if hoping to see the truth there. "Gary is quickly starting to miss you." "Thank you very much, Truth." I hugged him tightly, and going outside, I breathed in the fresh morning air. which seemed icy even in the warm season. Freedom, for the first time in a long time, was in my hands, but it tasted like rust. I mingled with the crowd and followed Thomas, keeping my distance, peering at his figure, trying not to lose sight of him. My heart was pounding like an old mailbox in a downpour. He walked confidently, almost cheerfully, as if he didn't suspect anything. I watched as he entered a boutique, not just a store, but one where the windows sparkle like jewels and where champagne is poured for you while you choose $1,000 dress. She was there too, Gloria. They walked together, laughing, her hand on his arm, as if she were not someone else's wife, but his lawful companion. I hid behind an advertising counter and couldn't take my eyes off what was happening. Everything was happening in reality, not in my head. And so he went to the cash register. I tensed, praying inwardly that it was just a showcase, but no, he took out a map. I recognized her instantly, by the scratch on the edge. It was the same spare credit card that I kept deep in my drawer, designed exclusively for emergencies. I've only used it a couple of times in a year. Thomas knew about it, but I never gave him permission to use it, and yet he paid with it, as if it were his personal wallet, confidently and habitually, without the slightest hesitation. It suddenly and painfully dawned on me, as if someone had pulled out the carpet from under my feet, on which I was standing, trying to maintain my balance in a fragile marriage and not completely fall apart under the weight of deception. I was so engrossed in my work, deadlines, editorial edits, sleepless nights on my laptop, where I tried to get at least one line out of myself that could evoke a response from the reader, that I completely stopped closely monitoring our family expenses. I trusted the system. The card is linked to the account, reports are coming, everything is under control. Only now, clutching the checks confirming his betrayal, not only mentally but also financially, I suddenly saw everything in a different light. The amounts in the account grew rapidly, at first unnoticeably. Among my business purchases, travel expenses, advances for covers, editing, small publishing fees, I attributed these expenses to employment, to the active stage of work. But now, after comparing the dates and places, I realized that Thomas cunningly wrote his expenses into my expense stream, so that they would be lost and not cause alarm. He took advantage of the fact that both of our cards were linked to the same account. And I, in my carelessness, overlooked this. The realization of his prudence hit my heart no less than his novel. Thomas didn't just break the vows he made to me on our wedding day, he used my work, my money, my trust to please another woman. And he did it without the slightest remorse. The last remnants of affection, which I, like a stupid girl, still clung to the past, began to evaporate, like water in a hot frying pan. I was reproaching myself, for being blind, for believing, for allowing him to play two roles for so long, a husband and a traitor, a father and a fraud. His double betrayal, romantic and material, became a bitter pill that I was forced to swallow. And it was in this realization that a moment of clarity was born. I could no longer and did not want to continue living this lie. I started documenting everything. I took some careful photos of the boutique's windows, which reflected their silhouettes, their gestures, their faces, and left there quietly, like a ghost, heading home with a heart as heavy as lead. In the following days, I focused my energy on a clear, cold plan, no tantrums, no scenes, no meaningless conversations. When he left, I sat down at his laptop, knowing that his phone was synchronized with the computer, and flipping through their messages. I was no longer surprised by the details. He spoke sweet words to her, promised to take her away, called her ours in the context of her future life, and most importantly, planned a 6-day trip with her during my vacation, a 6-day escape. How ironic, he was going to take a break with his mistress while I was supposed to take a break from him. I sat in front of the screen, pursing my lips until they were white, and whispered, "This is my chance." The thought of him leaving me with a child and going off to enjoy life with another woman with my own money ignited a fire in me. I planned to talk to him, put everything in its place, do everything cleanly, clearly, without scandal. But before his return, he shouldn't have felt threatened, so as not to run away from responsibility. But the most difficult obstacle in this regard was Gary, my boy, my little light. I couldn't let him get caught between our fights. He was too young to understand the depth of this pain, and too sensitive not to feel it at all. I needed to hide this storm from him, so I turned to my brother again, albeit with internal resistance. I didn't like to ask, especially without explaining the reasons. "I don't want to bother you, but could you look after Gary during the holidays? I asked, trying to make my voice light, as if it was just a favor, not something serious. He frowned. Vacation? All 6 days? What is it? He asked, already with a hint of suspicion. Yes, I need to sort out something important, I replied, trying not to look into his eyes so he wouldn't see the panic that was scratching at the surface. He looked at me intently, too intently. Something important, right? I nodded, but I could tell he wasn't buying it. His eyes became softer, but his voice became firmer. Rachel, you don't have to deal with all this alone. I froze. What do you mean? I whispered, barely audible, as if the words were starting to stick in my throat. He shook his head slowly, as if he was about to say something he didn't want to say. Thomas is cheating on you, isn't he? My heart skipped a beat. How did you? I began, but he interrupted. I found out from Gary. The world rocked. From Gary? Yes, he didn't speak directly, but he saw. I saw how Thomas behaved with someone who wasn't you, and that upset him. He was trying to understand, and I was trying to figure out why you suddenly cry so often in your room. I pressed my palm to my lips, barely holding back the lump that came up. My son knew, despite all my efforts, he knew because children always feel, even if we think we're hiding the truth from them. The revelation that came out of my brother's mouth was a harsh but undeniably true reminder of how perceptive children can be, even as young as Gary, and how often we adults make the mistake of believing we can protect them from the storms that play out in our hearts and between our walls. At least I really believed that I was coping, that quiet conversations behind closed doors, trying to smile at breakfast, and leaving the night lights on when I went to cry in the bathroom, that all of this was somehow keeping him safe. But now it became clear, my son felt it. He could feel the tension permeating the house, he could feel my sleepless nights, he could feel the lingering sadness that I couldn't hide even behind the most plausible mask, and that fact made everything much more difficult, because now it wasn't just Thomas's betrayal, but the fact that my attempt to shield the child from pain had failed. My brother, always calm and balanced, pressed gently, almost affectionately, but his every word penetrated deeply, like needles breaking through a barrier behind which I hid from myself everything that I was afraid to admit. Thomas's actions hurt you in a way that even Gary noticed, he said, and at that moment, everything inside me tightened. Are you thinking of staying with him? He said it without judgment, but his tone caused a wave of shame to rise inside. I didn't know how to answer, because that was the question I asked myself every night and every time I couldn't find the answer. While I was trying to find the words, Gary came into the room, and his small but serious voice caught me off guard. It's okay, Mom, I'm on your side. I turned around to see him standing in the doorway, with his hands clenched into fists at his sides and a look that seemed surprisingly mature. I don't want anyone who upsets you. As long as I have you, I'm fine. I couldn't resist, tears began to flow down my cheeks by themselves, and, kneeling in front of him, I hugged him so tightly, as if I was afraid that someone would take this little night away from me. Thank you, Gary, I whispered, my voice hoarse with emotion, and then, turning to my brother, I added, thank you, too. The support of these two, so different but equally devoted to me, filled me with determination. I wasn't afraid anymore. I knew what to do. Together with Gary, we began to carefully, step by step, prepare for the move. I had planned everything out. Thomas was going on a trip with Gloria, and this was my opportunity, quietly, without tantrums and tears, to leave the life that had long ceased to be home. My brother helped us pack our things. He didn't ask any questions, just stood by, carrying boxes, folding books, and taking pre-selected bags to his car. Everything had to be ready by the time Thomas left the house. And so the evening came before his departure. There was a tense silence in the house, as if the furniture itself was holding its breath. I went into the bedroom and saw him standing by the suitcase, carefully packing his things. Thomas, I said his name calmly, but with a firmness I rarely heard in my voice. Why are you packing your suitcase? What's happening? He turned around, a shadow flickered across his face, but he quickly righted himself. I'm going with my friends, tomorrow, on a journey. He avoided my gaze, concentrating on folding his t-shirts as if they could become a shield between him and the truth. A trip? Why didn't you mention this before? I asked, controlling myself. It was a last-minute plan, nothing serious, he muttered, waving his hand casually. I use my pocket money. His tone became irritated, and I realized he wanted to end the conversation, but I wouldn't let him. Are you sure it's just with your friends? He tensed, his shoulders shook, his breathing became heavier, but he continued to pretend. Persistent, isn't she? He muttered, stuttering nervously. Good, I understand, I replied, letting a note of irony creep into my voice. Enjoy the ride with your friends. I would have enjoyed it anyway, he muttered, but the confidence in his voice was bursting at the seams. When he came out, I was left alone in the bedroom, my mind was racing. Has he ever been honest? Perhaps if he hadn't lied, if we could have spoken frankly, if he hadn't tried to hide behind fake friends and pocket money, we could have solved everything differently, to disperse with dignity, to think about alimony. About Gary's upbringing, there were times when my love for him was pure, deep, and unquestionable. He was there when the first novel didn't go well, he hugged me when I cried from rejections, but now it's all in the past. I didn't want to turn the pain into bitterness, I didn't want to pull it out of me and throw it at him, but I needed to protect myself, to protect my son, and create a future for us free from lies. I knew that this moment was our transition, our frontier. And it was in the morning, when he left, that a new betrayal began, unexpected but inevitable. I opened the drawer, knowing exactly what I would find there, and I was not mistaken. Thomas took my credit card again, the one I had hidden in case of real need, the card that was supposed to be a protective cushion, not his personal cash register, not the slightest remorse, not an attempt to ask, just the habitual movement of his hand into the drawer, as if everything still belonged to him, as if he had the right to dispose of something for which he had long since lost all moral basis. I didn't hesitate, picking up the phone, I called the bank, reported the loss, cancelled the card, deactivated everything I could, and after hanging up, I felt a lightness in my chest for the first time in a long time. It was a small but powerful action, which was the essence of my new determination. When Gary woke up, his eyes were sparkling with a clear, uncluttered childish light, and, jumping out of bed, he exclaimed enthusiastically, "Mom!" I smiled, already knowing that there was no turning back, and everything I had done was right. "Yes, Gary, today is the day," I said, trying to put as much warmth into the words as possible, and seeing how he was beaming, I felt that all the doubts that had plagued me in the previous weeks had simply evaporated. I closed one chapter of our lives and opened a new one. The credit card has been cancelled, Thomas is in the past, now it's time, our time, to start over, to build a house where there will be no lies, fear and secret calls, where Gary can grow up with the confidence that his mother is strong and honest, even if it hurts. With the help of my brother, we moved without fanfare, without a scene, without unnecessary noise, simply, calmly, clearly. Our belongings were carefully moved to a new house, quiet, cozy, filled with light and silence, in which there was no place for past screams. Thomas's belongings were sent to another location, an address that he himself had once indicated as a backup. It was his decision, albeit an indirect one. The next day, when Gary, my brother, and I were unpacking boxes, hanging curtains, and arranging books on the shelves, I suddenly felt a strange, deep sense of peace that did not come immediately, but nevertheless sprouted, like the first sprout in spring after a prolonged winter, future. It wasn't scary anymore, it beckoned, and at that moment, the phone rang. "Hi." "Oh, Rachel, Thomas's voice sounded uncertain, almost apologetic. "Something happened, you see. This trip turned out to be more expensive than I thought. Could you send some money?" He tried to speak lightly, but I immediately realized that he was in trouble. The card is blocked, the money is gone. He hoped to get out, bypassing the real point, that he was trying to take advantage of my kindness again. "Thomas," I said flatly, "didn't you plan the budget for this trip yourself?" He hesitated. "Well, yes, but things have changed circumstances." "I'm sorry," I interrupted, trying not to let myself fall into the old habit of being sympathetic, "but I can't send you anything." He sighed, irritation creeping into his voice. "Well, don't be like that. If you don't help me, I'll be the only one who won't enjoy this trip." I raised an eyebrow, not even holding back a grin. The only one? I asked again. That is us, my friends and I. Well, his confusion could be heard even through the phone. Thomas, I said, lowering my voice a little, you're on vacation, right? You just want to enjoy the moment, but I'm sorry, the card you took is no longer working, so that. What are you talking about? Rachel? What kind of card? Then he switched to his usual tactic of pretending to be innocent. Pretending you don't know won't help, my voice became as hard as steel, you're panicking and talking nonsense. I don't know anything about the map. That's enough, I said abruptly, breaking into a semitone in which the truth was trembling, held back for too long. I know everything, Thomas, I know you cheated on me with Gloria, my best friend. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Are you serious? There was an oppressive silence on the other end of the phone, then. No, it's not what you think. I don't. It's. Stop it, I said, my voice shaking with rage. Stop it. You had a family, Thomas, you destroyed it, you lied, you stole, you cheated, and you used my card like it was okay. Do you even realize how low you've fallen? Rachel, let's just calm down for a minute, he began, but it was too late. Calm down? I asked, feeling everything coming out. How do you imagine it? Should I calm down when I'm dealing with someone I despise? Who destroyed trust, love and respect? I looked at the phone as if I wanted to get through it and see his face. Just so you know, I'm not going to forgive you, and I'm not going to help you either, and Gloria let her seek happiness somewhere else. I paused, feeling the last wave of pain rise in my throat. Don't ever show yourself to me or Gary again. And with that, I hung up the phone. At the same moment, as if to confirm the whole tragicomedy, the phone rang again. It was her, Gloria, his mistress. Hey, Rachel, what the hell did you do? Gloria's voice slapped the silence like a slap in the face. I silently stared at the phone screen, where her name was flashing, and, allowing myself a second of heavy breathing, I answered with almost theatrical calm, Gloria, it's been a long time. How is the trip going with my husband? I asked, putting into my voice the icy irony that I had been holding back for so long. She shouted furiously, shut up. Tell me, what did you arrange? Are you crazy? I allowed myself to chuckle. Don't play dumb, Gloria, you got Thomas's stuff at your place, didn't you? She hesitated, but not for long. Did you really do that? Of course, when we moved out, I ordered that all his possessions be sent directly to your address. By the way, he mentioned the address himself once. I decided that since you're so close, it would only make sense if his suits, watches, and expensive shoes moved in next to him. Well, considering that you were also married, and your husband, as I believe, was at home, everything was delivered to him at once. I paused, along with a letter in which I outlined all the circumstances in as much detail as possible. Silence first, then her voice broke out shrilly, trembling with tension. This is not a joke. What have you done? My husband found out everything. Well, Gloria, I said her name softly, almost with pity, you brought this on yourself. By deciding to have an affair while married, you betrayed more than just him, you betrayed me, too. I trusted you, you were supposed to be my friend. You're the worst, I underestimated you, she said with hatred. I'm sorry, that sounds loud, I said, still calm. It's just that my best friend was having an affair with my husband. How can you expect to be forgiven? I didn't mean it seriously, it was just a joke. I would never be interested in someone like him, she muttered almost plaintively, trying to wriggle out. I don't care if it's a joke or not, you slept with him anyway, and I'm filing for divorce. Yes, you had an affair, that's a fact. I will never forgive you, and, by the way, I will be demanding compensation, so, Gloria, get ready. What? You can't demand. I didn't agree to anything like that. She flared up, but there was already a hint of panic in her voice. Well, you'll find out soon enough, I replied calmly. That's exactly what you deserve. I'm a housewife, I don't have any money, I can't pay compensation. She exclaimed, already pleading. I don't care, Gloria, figure it out for yourself, or ask your new lover, although knowing Thomas, I don't think he'll help much. I paused, then added abruptly, oh, wait, goodbye. And before she could breathe a word, I disconnected the call. Then, silently, with determination, I opened the phone settings and blocked her number. That's it. I turned to my lawyer, a woman with a cold mind and formulations as sharp as a blade. We filed for divorce quickly and legally cleanly. I applied for alimony, for compensation for the financial damage caused by Thomas, including all unauthorized expenses on my credit card. I demanded that he and Gloria be accomplices together. Their world crumbled like a house of cards in a gust of wind. The financial pressure proved too much for Gloria's marriage. After her husband received the letter and found out about the affair, he filed for divorce. She was left homeless. The parents to whom she tried to turn for support, disappointed by her actions, refused to help her. Now Gloria lives where she works. At night, she serves drinks at a local bar. Immersed in what once seemed like a game, Thomas tried to stay by her side, thinking that there was still a place for him in her life, but she, too, having lost everything, unleashed her anger on him. Their relationship was over. Finally, no refund. Thomas now supports himself with odd part-time jobs, morning shifts at the supermarket, evening delivery, some repairs for cash. His long-term unemployment, when he lived at my expense, has now turned into an inability to find a stable job. But I made a promise to myself: if he delays paying alimony or compensation at least once, I will file a lawsuit, without hesitation, for my own sake, for Gary's sake. Life in our new home has settled into a quiet but steady rhythm. I wake up early, make us breakfast, walk Gary to school, and then go back to writing, only now with a different heart. There is no pain in him, only bright sadness and deep strength. Gary is growing fast, getting taller, smarter, and more subtle in his judgments every week. I see in him the kindness that I try to maintain, and the confidence that our new, clean life has given him. Our every day is filled with simple joys: laughing at dinner, reading books before going to bed, walking along a quiet street, and now my main task is to prevent the pain that he once had to feel too early from settling back into his life. I will do everything to keep our days bright, and I believe they will be like that.